What's up, AP World students? Today, we're diving headfirst into Unit 7, Topic 1, the major shifts in state power after 1900. Get ready, because the 20th century was a wild ride of collapsing empires and new powers rising from the ashes. Let's start with the big picture. What caused these massive empires, which had dominated the globe for centuries, to suddenly crumble? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of internal and external factors. Internally, many of these empires were dealing with serious problems. Think economic hardship, political corruption, and growing calls for reform from within. People were tired of the old ways and wanted change. Externally, the pressures were just as intense. The world wars, especially World War I and World War II, absolutely decimated these old powers, draining their resources and weakening their grip on their colonies. At the same time, new ideologies like nationalism and self-determination were spreading like wildfire, inspiring colonized peoples to demand their independence. So, which empires are we talking about? Let's tick them off. First, the Ottoman Empire, once known as the sick man of Europe, it had been declining for a while, but World War I was the final nail in the coffin. After the war, it was dismantled, and from its heartland, the modern Republic of Turkey was born in 1923 under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. He launched a series of sweeping secular reforms to modernize the new nation. Next up, the Russian Empire. The stress of World War I, combined with food shortages and widespread discontent with the Tsar's autocratic rule, led to the Russian Revolution in 1917. The Romanov dynasty, which had ruled for over 300 years, was overthrown. This paved the way for the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, to seize power and establish the world's first communist state, the Soviet Union. This was a monumental shift, creating a new global power with a completely different political and economic system. Let's hop over to East Asia and talk about the Qing dynasty in China. Like the Ottomans, the Qing had been struggling for a long time with internal rebellions, like the Taiping Rebellion, and external pressures, like the Opium Wars and unequal treaties with Western powers. By the early 1900s, the empire was on its last legs. The 1911 revolution, led by figures like Sun Yat-sen, finally brought the dynasty down, ending thousands of years of imperial rule in China. The new Republic of China was established, but it faced decades of instability, civil war, and foreign invasion before the communists eventually took control in 1949. So we have the collapse of these massive land-based empires, Ottoman, Russian, and Qing. But what about the colonial powers? They didn't get off easy either. The British, French, and other European empires also began to unravel. The idea of self-determination, championed by figures like U.S. President Woodrow Wilson after World War I, gave a powerful voice to anti-colonial movements. Leaders in colonies across Asia and Africa started organizing and demanding independence. Let's look at India, the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. The Indian National Congress became the leading force for independence. Through the leadership of figures like Mahatma Gandhi and his philosophy of nonviolent civil disobedience, or satyagraha, millions of Indians were mobilized. Decades of protests, marches, and negotiations finally led to India gaining its independence in 1947. This was a huge blow to the British Empire and inspired countless other colonies to fight for their freedom. In French West Africa, leaders like Leopold Sédar Senghor in Senegal also pushed for independence, often through a combination of political negotiation and grassroots movements. The process of decolonization in Africa really accelerated after World War II. As European powers were too weak to maintain their vast empires, one by one, nations across the continent gained their independence throughout the 1950s and 60s. Sometimes, the path to independence wasn't peaceful. In Algeria, a French settler colony, the fight for freedom turned into a brutal 8-tier war. The National Liberation Front, or FLN, waged a guerrilla campaign against French forces. The conflict was incredibly violent and deeply divided French society, but it ultimately resulted in Algerian independence in 1962. Another example of a negotiated transfer of power can be seen in the Gold Coast, a British colony. Under the charismatic leadership of Kwame Nkrumah, the Gold Coast became the first sub-Saharan African nation to gain independence in 1957, renaming itself Ghana. Nkrumah's strategy of positive action, which included strikes and boycotts, put immense pressure on the British to grant independence peacefully. Let's quickly review the different ways power shifted. We saw empires collapsing from within due to political and economic stress, like the Qing and Russian empires. We saw new states emerging from the ashes of old ones, like Turkey, and we saw colonies gaining independence through various means. Some colonies achieved independence through negotiated agreements. Think of India's long struggle leading to a transfer of power from Britain, or Ghana's relatively peaceful path to sovereignty. Other colonies had to fight for it through armed conflict. The Algerian War for Independence is a prime example. Another is the Vietnam War, where Vietnamese nationalists led by Ho Chi Minh first fought against the French and then against the United States to create a unified, independent Vietnam. So, what's the big takeaway for AP World? Unit 7. Topic 1 is all about the decline of old imperial powers and the rise of new states in the 20th century. You need to understand the causes both internal and external that led to the collapse of the Ottoman, Russian, and Qing empires. You also need to know the different paths to independence taken by former colonies. Compare the negotiated independence of India or Ghana with the armed struggles in Algeria or Vietnam. Understanding these patterns of change and continuity is key to crushing the AP exam. Alright, that's a wrap on the major shifts in state power after 1900. It's a complex topic, but hopefully this breakdown makes it clearer. Remember the key empires, the key individuals, and the different methods used to achieve change? Thanks for watching. Be sure to review your notes, and I'll see you in the next video as we dive deeper into Unit 7. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more AP World Review.